Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the Northwest University's fourth Research Integrity webinar series. The theme for the day is Scientific Integrity in Research. I am Lesego Tom from the School of Biological Sciences within the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences. An important notice, all participants are requested to make use of the Q&A platform in order to write down any questions that you have regarding the presentations. Please ensure, colleagues, that you write your questions during the presentations so that at the end of the presentations, the panelists can then provide answers. To kickstart our program, I'd like to call the Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, Prof. Babs Suraj Lal, to deliver the welcome address and also provide a brief introduction to the purpose of the day. Prof. Babs, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molale Tom. Good afternoon, colleagues. It is really with great pleasure that I welcome you to the fourth installment of the Northwest University Integrity webinar series. It is really heartwarming to see so many of you present. At the outset, I would like to thank Prof. Nenesi and her team for organizing these webinars, which play such a vital role in the lives of our researchers as well as our academics. This webinar has been organized in a way that important issues and concerns regarding research integrity are addressed and discussed in bite-sized chunks. The importance of integrity in research cannot be overstated. Let us ask ourselves the question, what is integrity? Simply put, integrity means being truthful, even if the truth may appear unacceptable or unattractive. Research integrity refers to research being conducted in such a way that fellow researchers and others have confidence and trust in the methods and findings of a study, as these findings may have an impact on the lives of others, contribute to policy development, and provide potential solutions to identified problems. The theme of today's webinar is scientific integrity in research. In Neck et al. In 2016, scientific integrity is described as the condition that occurs when persons adhere to accepted standards, professional values, and practices of the relevant scientific committee. Adherence to these standards ensures objectivity, clarity, and reproducibility, as well as utility of scientific and scholarly activities and assessments. This helps prevent bias, fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, outside interference, censorship, and inadequate procedural and information security. Therefore, if one simply adheres to the basic principles of scientific integrity, one will not fall prey to biased reporting, fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, and other related practices. Kretzer et al. In 2019 suggested a few interesting best practices for instilling scientific integrity. Among these are the training of researchers in robust scientific methods, in the use of appropriate experimental design and statistics, and in responsible research practices for scientists at all levels, with the training content regularly updated and presented by qualified scientists. They also suggest the strengthening of scientific integrity oversight and processes throughout the research, with a focus on training in ethics and conduct, as well as encouraging transparency in research. Furthermore, they advise the development and implementation of educational tools to teach communication skills that uphold scientific integrity. With regard to publications, they suggest a strengthening of the peer review process and encourage scientific journals to publish unanticipated findings that meet the standards of quality and scientific integrity. Colleagues, scientific integrity also promotes a variety of other important moral and social values, such as compliance with the law and health and safety. I'm sure that our esteemed speakers today will add to what I've already mentioned by sharing with us their wisdom on scientific integrity in research. At this stage, I would like to extend a special word of welcome to our speakers, who I'm sure will build on the brief introduction I have provided on research integrity. I would like to welcome Professor Neo-Marcus, who will do a presentation on integrity in engineering research. Professor Erlang, who will share with us integrity in law research, and Dr. Sibo, who will take us through integrity in natural sciences. Colleagues, sit back and relax as our speakers take us through another exciting journey in our webinar series. I'll now hand over to Dr. Molale Tom.
Thank you, Prof. Babs. Now, colleagues, we move over to the presentations. But before that, I remind all participants to remember to write all questions that they have relating to the presentations in the Q&A platform. Please, colleagues, we encourage you to have questions because we would like to have interactive sessions at the end of each presentation. So the first presentation, titled Integrity in Engineering Research, will be presented by Prof. Hein Neo-Marcus, who obtained his PhD in the field of chemical engineering, specializing in membrane reactors at the University of Twente, based in the Netherlands in 1999. During the last 20 years, Prof. Neo-Marcus's research interests have been focused around chemical engineering disciplines such as separation technology, reactor engineering, physical transport phenomena, thermodynamics, and more recently, emissions control from coal-fired power stations, coal conversion technologies, coal gasification, coal combustion, and hydrogen technologies. In 2010, Prof. Neo-Marcus was appointed as full professor at the Northwest University after achieving the NRF rating as C2 professor in 2008. This rating was then extended in 2013 and 2018. He was appointed as EPPEI co-chair holder since the inception in 2012 up until 2017 and is still active in this group as a researcher. Also in the relation with CECIL and NWU, Prof. Hein coordinated the Hub and Spoke initiative for 2 cycles of 5 years. He is also involved in the CECIL Inter-University Cooperation Program, where he is involved in 4 studies. Further, he initiated industrial research programs with EVRES, Tronx, and Africary, and started and coordinated a program on coal testing with the Department of Health of the Northwest Province. Since 2020, Prof. Hein acts as the director of the Center of Excellence in the Carbon-Based Fuels. Prof. Hein, welcome. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction, Chairperson. And also thank you, Prof. Babs, for your introduction, which almost, what must I say more after this introduction? I think you said everything. But let me start my presentation. If my presentation can come up, please. We have been asked to give this presentation on integrity in engineering research. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge my co-author, Dr. Rianette Coetzee. We have set up this together, and she's done a tremendous amount of work in this sense. Also, just a disclaimer in a sense, this is actually were presented from our 2 points of view, so it does not necessarily reflect the faculty's holistic approach here. And I'm going to, we are engineers, so we presented from a very practical approach, mostly examples from issues that we saw at, for instance, higher degree committee meetings, personal research experience. So there's definitely no theoretical framework of engineering research. We discuss some aspects of integrity, not an holistic and definitely not a scientific approach here. Okay, so, I just want to say, no, integrity and engineering are not mutual exclusive. And we care for this, at least the two presenters here are care very much for integrity in research. Can we go to the next slide, please? So first of all, when you get this question to do this, we look a little bit at ethics, integrity are normally intermixed a little bit. What's the difference? So how we understood it is that we say, well, the ethics are more the processes and regulations that create an environment for moral practices. So they're very important. But of course, integrity is still needed from a personal characteristic to follow those processes and regulations. So it's more people related. So we even had a discussion that integrity is probably even something inherent to a person. You are born and cannot change it. But whether that is so is debatable. And also what is good integrity, what is high integrity should probably be people specific also. What is that regarded? Next slide, please. So if we looked at it, we immediately thought about the EXA, Code of Conduct. EXA stands for the Engineering Council of South Africa. So that is kind of regulatory body of the engineers. And it has a code of conduct. It can be found on the link below. It's actually, if you read it, more applicable to say engineering practices in general, but definitely also applicable to engineering research. Also, I want to state that in the execution of engineering research, I think we have a big overlap with natural sciences. Since our fundamental basis, the natural sciences are the same. Although indeed engineering is normally closer to the application, we still think that it's very much the same. So Dr. Sevele, who will represent the natural sciences, can probably add much to what I'm saying. But essentially, and Prof. Babs already summarized it almost perfectly, the use of honest, verifiable methods in proposing, performing, and evaluating research reporting research results with particular attention to adherence to rules, regulation, guidelines, and following commonly accepted professional codes or norms. The difficulty with this always, and what is, for instance, you have not quantified things here, it's all qualitative. What are commonly accepted professional codes and so on. So that's always a little bit of a gray area, in my opinion. Then we go to the next slide. Thank you. So that is a set, and then I'm going to go more to what I said, more a practical approach. How do we try to do research? And there is a statement on ethical research and scholarly practices, which I think is very useful. And I think, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think also the Noordwes-Universiteit has undersigned this. It's very small, but I have some snippets on the next two slides, so we can do the next slides where I want to discuss some aspects in this sense. So for instance, there is a statement on ethics and integrity that researchers are responsible for their own research and for research performed under their supervision, and must take due care to ensure the publication only of authentic, accurate, and reproducible findings, including findings that do not support their working hypothesis. As Prof. Babs also say, that can sometimes happen. So later on, I will discuss some issues we see with this statement, which commonly, or not commonly, but sometimes occur in the practice of engineering research. Also, I think an important one is methodology and data. We must use appropriate research methods, assess all outcomes critically, maintain a full record of the research, including all supporting data, and objective interpret and report findings. So a few things already, again, relatively qualitative. What are appropriate methods? That is, so I think there is sometimes also a gray area with lack of knowledge. Is done something with lack of integrity or lack of knowledge? I have an example of that also later. Assess all outcomes critically. I think that's very important also for study leaders. And also, again, later on, we will see it boils, to our opinion, often down to a kind of quality-quantity discussion. As you should take sufficient care and time to look at your results, to look at student reports, to look at your own publications, to see and to improve on quality, to make it publishable. So do I take 10 students and do I have to rush through everything, or do I take 2 students and make very good research output from it? Authorships, I also try to discuss, depending a little bit how time goes. All authors who have made an intellectual contribution to the research publication, and only those authors must be included in the contributing authors. And I think in my personal experience, and even with myself, that's not always 100% the case, and all authors must read and approve the final draft. That's in practice, to my opinion, also not always happening. There are even much stronger statements on this, stating that every author should have the knowledge of all details of the study of the paper that has been published. So if somebody wants to know somebody from the paper, he can in fact approach all authors, and they must be aware of the detailed content of all publications. I think that is something to realize when we publish. Can we go to the next slide? Good peer review. That's also something, peer reviews. I'm not only thinking here about journal publications, but also, for instance, on thesis reviews or examiners of our M&Ds, where we have also some integrity issues experienced at our higher degree committee meetings. And also, if you ask for a reviewer, you must take the time to do a proper quality work. And we are often very busy, and we are asked to, for instance, review journal papers or M's or D's. But I think that if we accept such an invitation, we should also do that with due care and critically, and should take the time for it to do that in a good manner. And as said, and this said in the statements, and I made a red border around it, and I said it already. Maybe it all boils down to quality over quantity, and this is also a statement which I wholeheartedly underline. And I think with our discussions within the research teams, we also have discussed that lately. We should maybe strive more towards quality over quantity. If we look at rewarding of research at our university, unfortunately, in my opinion, it's still based on number of outputs. We don't look at quality at all. And that should actually, also again, in our opinion, change in time, that we also look more at quality of the work than quantity. Also realizing that the number of publications and the number of research outputs, the number of journal publications are exponentially increasing. So we can better have a smaller amount of good papers than a large amount of poorer papers, although indeed our rewarding system does not stimulate this. Maybe to the next slide. Yeah, so depending on the time, and please stop me when I go over my time, some personal experiences for research quality checkpoints. Well, choice of examiners. We are all aware, I think, for people working at the university, that there are rules regarding the choice of examiners. And for instance, they must have a specific degree. If you want to review examine a doctoral thesis, you must have the doctoral degree yourself. So in this sense, there are rules, but there are that are minimum requirements. So if you choose your examiners, you can easily choose two persons that have the sufficient qualification, but are they really the experts in the field? Are you really want to have examiners that critically look at your work and give good advice for further work that can improve the quality of your group? Or do you say, well, let's take examiners that maybe are not so critical and that we are pretty sure that the students will pass, so that my record is again in order. So for your personal choice of selecting examiners, and you show integrity, I think, if you really take care to take examiners that are of good quality and also not repeatedly use the same examiners. There are relatively little guidelines, let's say, in the A rules. And you can see the A rules as a guideline, a professional guideline, but maybe you must do some more in that respect. Data storage is something I realized only lately, and we don't do it in our group very well, to be honest. Indeed, and we have in our group in chemical engineering a lot of experimental work. That means that we have experimental results, raw data, which is normally with some mathematical procedures converted to some more meaningful data. But do we store those experimental data and all the in-between calculations, do we store that well enough? I was actually made aware of that in our ethics course that was given to us. And I'm definitely strive towards more attention to this in the future. Then I told already on the study list, do I choose acceptable examiners? But journals is exactly the same. Again, do I go for low impact journals? Do I go for high impact journals? Do I go for journals I know it's easy to get in? Do I more look at the chance of success? Or do I really look at the journal and a top journal, and instead of publishing 3 articles in low impact journals, do I go for one in a top journal? So that is an integrity matter in my opinion. Sufficient time taken for review of reports. I said that already. I mean, if you are asked for a reviewer, also do a good job. And it is unfortunately can take you a while, and normally from my point of view, I mean, a journal paper review takes me about half to 1 day. Acceptance of authorship, and I must unfortunately say that from my own experience, I have publications on my list which I have not even seen before publications. And when I did an NRF evaluation, I went to look at Google Scholar to look at my list of publication. I saw one publication which I didn't have in my CV. So somehow it came up, and somehow this was also submitted without my knowledge. And yeah, what could I do then? What can you do? So this must really be aware under your persons that if you publish, you cannot just put names on. And also when you are in a senior position, you are often approached from a reason of, well, we must keep him as a friend, but you must you must really show integrity here, that if you think you did not do enough, you didn't make a real contribution to a certain journal, that you say, well, publish it, but I don't think my name should be on it. As I said already, general, it boils more or less down, in my opinion, in our opinion, to a quality quantity discussion. I'm not sure, Chair, if I still have time, or that we should go to I have one more slide. We can go to the next slide.
You have 4 minutes, Prof.
Okay, great. So to some practical examples which align with the good practices that I send. So we perform a lot of experience, and for instance, uncertainty analysis is not always up and down. So everything you do in natural sciences is not exact. Mathematics is the only science where 2 per 3 is 5, but 2 per 3 is not 5 in natural sciences if you measure things, because there's always an uncertainty in the 5 you obtain. And I think personally that a well-performed uncertainty analysis is almost mandatory to any work. And if you don't do this, your outcome doesn't have much meaning. And it's not always done, and it's not always fair done. In my experience with students, I ask sometimes to do, for instance, a carbon balance. So, for instance, if we study a carbon reaction, does all the carbon that come in also come out? And often they come in the first shot, they say, yeah, it's 99.9%. Well, I find it back. Then I normally say, okay, do that again, because that's too good. And also, I was reviewing an article last week, and the person reported a uncertainty which was unacceptably low. That just cannot be. So it's not done correctly. And therefore, I say always there's also a kind of a gray area between good practices and lack of knowledge. So maybe people do the best to their best knowledge and to their best integrity. But if you're not knowledgeable in the field, then you still don't do it according to good practice. So you must be, if you work in the field, of course, you must be really a specialist. Another thing, and that is my last example, which I'm going to discuss here, is specifically what we see in performing of a TEE. And a TEE stands here for the technical economic and evaluation. So you do some experiments, and you want to say, engineers like to do that, and it's always normally a task of them to say, well, we have now done this experiment, but what does it mean for a large-scale process? What does it mean for reality if we want to do this in practice? So then they're going to do all kind of calculations technically. So they draw a flow sheet and all flow streams and etc., and all the equipment is scaled, and you have your cost of your process, and you have your income from your products, etc. And almost always we have a very profitable economic analysis, and everything is wonderful. So do we do that really correct? Do we do it really according to what we really should do, or do we skew the analysis a little bit to get the positive results? I just want to I see already that your camera is on. I want to finalize with the last slide, which is actually, I found that very, this is my co-author, Royanette. She said to me, if everyone had the same level of integrity, we would not need any quality control systems. Very good one. I thought, from where did you get that? I want to include that. She said, no, it's for myself. So if we all had the same level of integrity, we probably didn't have this seminar, but now we have. So with this final quote, I want to give the word back to the chairperson, Dr. Lesego.
Thank you very much, Prof. Hein. And I see in our Q&A, we have 3 questions. However, we don't have time for answering live. So if you would be so kind, Prof. Hein, to type the answers in the Q&A box, we would appreciate that.
Would gladly do that. I only do not feel that they are specific to my talk, or
perhaps Dr. Siphelele can then answer those, because I
maybe
think
we can have them till the end for a general discussion.
That's correct. That's fine, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Hein. So our next presentation is titled Integrity in Law Research, and it will be presented by Prof. Vian Erlang, who is a full professor of law at the Northwest University, where he currently teaches property law. He is also an NRF rated researcher holding a Y1 rating. His doctoral dissertation, Property in Virtual Worlds, was completed at the University of Stellenbosch as doctoral candidate for the South African Research Chair in Property Law. Professor Erlang presents sessions on various areas of space law at the annual Gujarat Air and Space Law Academy held at the Gujarat National Law University. He is also on the board of various international conferences and associations, including the Association for Law, Property and Society and the Young Property Lawyers Forum, and has been an associate editor of the prestigious Potchefstroom Electronic Law Journal for a number of years. He is a fellow of the International Institute of Space Law, as well as a fellow of the European Law Institute, and an active member of a number of ELI working groups, specifically those dealing with the legal effect of new technologies. He was recently awarded the prestigious von Humboldt George Foster Research Fellowship for experienced researchers. Prof. Erlang's research interests and publications include, among others, aspects of property law, space law, virtual world law, cyber law, and social media law, usually with a focus on how concepts of property function in these areas, in particular how property and property law function in new and unexplored environments such as cyberspace and outer space. Professor Erlang has been involved in research ethics for the past few years and is the current chairperson of the Law Faculty's Research Ethics Committee. He is also a member of various other research ethics committees, including Hamilton Rec and the Senate Committee for Research Ethics. In addition to his international publications, Professor Erlang frequently presents papers at international conferences, usually about new and exciting developments and topics. Prof. Erlang, welcome, and the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Molale Tom. I suppose if I knew you were going to read all those nice things about me, I would have just sent you a thing that said, I do research about weird stuff, and leave it at that. But perhaps I can start by going back to one of the first questions posed to us and answered by Shumani Chikota, which really comes down to one of the important aspects on how we do things at law. And the question was, do the two concepts, scientific integrity and research integrity, mean one and the same thing? Now, this is a very important question. And perhaps to put things into perspective for those of you who aren't very well versed in how lawyers do research, I'm just going to hold up a book. And I know you can't see the text, but you can see my fingers. Okay, so there where my fingers are. There. Everything below my fingers are footnotes. Now that is your average legal textbook. Now in a footnote goes everything that you need to substantiate what you are writing. And the general rule is every fact that you state or statement that you make has to be backed up by reference to a source. In other words, by citing someone else who has written about this or knows supposedly more about it than you do. So this is slightly different than you would have this in the natural sciences. We don't need to prove our work. We also don't have to worry about whether 2 + 2 is 4 or not. But you have to be able to back up everything that you say by referring to other scientists in your field. So this is the way in which we tend to check on academic integrity. It's usually very visibly apparent if someone who has written something in law did their work and has an authoritative type of paper that they've written. Of course, we tend to disagree with each other quite a lot, but at the very least, if we can see on your research that you have done the work, you've provided the citations, then we can give you a higher level of acceptance for your work. So this is one of the aspects that we deal with in law. And a separate perspective is the relationship that we have between our scientific committee and our ethics committee in the law faculty. Now, our scientific committee functions pretty much the same as all the other faculties. There is a rigorous process of teaching, and then a very specific way in which students have to provide their research proposals. A number of things have to be adhered to. But what we do see from time to time, and I've also picked this up as a committee member on other ethics committees, is that every now and again we find research that pass our table that is scientifically quite acceptable. So in order for scientific integrity, it is perfect. There's no issues with it, and it would have gone through. But as soon as it reaches us and we have to apply criteria of ethically soundness to this research, it fails. And what we then have to do is we have to send it back, suggest some changes, and these changes then has to be okayed again by the scientific committee again. So we've got that relationship where we do this little dance. And then while after ethics approval has been granted, we see that the ethics committee has an oversight job. We monitor every now and again, but it's not active monitoring, it's passive monitoring. And then the academic integrity, the scientific integrity should once again apply. Now, when I started writing something for this session, I did what most academics do, and I misread the actual title. So you will see in front of you, that is just basically a hit list of research ethics. But since it's there, let me quickly speak to it, and then I'll come back to scientific integrity. So in the first place, we see that research ethics is separate from legal ethics. In law, we teach the students about legal ethics. And of course, you are all aware, in spite of all the jokes about lawyers being corrupt, that people in the legal profession are held to a higher standard of accountability, and we are supposed to be trustworthy. So this is something that we try to indoctrinate into our students. But of course, research ethics is something but separate from this. And the same goes for scientific ethics. Then at the faculty, we really focus on capacity building. Traditionally, law was not one of the areas where we did any ethical oversight. So this is a very new thing, but since it has started to be mandated from about 2011, 2012, we have started doing oversight in line with the health sciences type of ethics approval process, and we have been teaching our staff and students about research ethics, and we do this quite intensively. So, for example, we do not allow any study to be done at this stage, even if there are no or low ethics risks. No studies may be done if it doesn't have ethical approval, and the students also has to provide proof that they have credentials, that they've done some sort of course about the background of research ethics. Then in our focus on research ethics, we've got a bit of a streamlined process since we don't deal with health sciences. But the main factors that we focus on is that we ensure that everyone obtains informed consent, that the informed consent is obtained in the proper way, that it is written in the proper language, that the participants can understand it. And then we do a risk-benefit analysis to see whether the research will benefit the research subjects, or at the very least that they won't suffer any negative consequences from them. Then we've got our Law Reg Ethics Committee, who oversees the processes and procedures. And something to note here is that this is also applicable to staff and students. So staff who want to publish anything that might have an ethical consideration also has to submit proof that their proposal has gone through scientific review, and then it has to come for ethics review through our committee. Then at the Law Reg Committee, we also take the risk-benefit analysis a little bit further. We look at the risk-benefit for the Northwest University, for the research subjects, as well as the wider community. And this is something that quite often snags participants or people who want to do research, is that as soon as we see, well, it's a scientifically valid study, but as soon as we say, well, how does this benefit the wider community? How are you phrasing this? What value is this that we as a wider community will get from it? And then when the answer sometimes is very little, we have to reject such applications. Usually it just takes a little bit of a different nuance in the research itself, but the oversight is very important for that. And then finally there I have noted down challenges. So the biggest challenge for law is that we really aren't well versed in quantitative studies and dealing with empirical data. So if we have anyone who wants to do such studies, we have to ensure that they are first off trained in terms of that scientific models. Right. Then we get to the scientific integrity. And I will go through this quickly because I hope to get to one or two questions. The best thing, of course, when you are doing research is that, well, we find this a lot. People ask, well, should we share our ideas or works in progress with other people? And there's a general feeling that you should not, because as soon as you say to someone else, I'm doing research about A, B, and C, people fear that someone else is going to steal it and then they won't be able to do it anymore. Now, empirically, this does not happen quite a lot. It does happen from time to time, but not a lot. So with that in mind, we deal with copyright. So as soon as you have said your idea or written it down on paper, it is yours, you've got copyright in it. So if you can prove that and someone else then steals it, you can prove it, and then there should not be an issue for you. When you're dealing with ideas or you're listening to a seminar like this one and someone touches on an interesting subject or says something that is very interesting, it's better to ask that person, would they mind if you took it further? Would they mind if you wrote an article about this? And if that person then says, no, I'm busy with it myself, then the best way to deal with it is just to leave it. So rather ask permission or leave it. And then always acknowledge, even if someone gave you an idea or you can't remember, at the very least say, this was inspired by something said at this and this conference. Put it in a footnote. As you saw, we like footnotes. And then maybe for law, this is a very important thing, and it touches a little bit on the integrity, scientific integrity. Always try and interrogate the primary sources yourself and don't rely on others' references to it. So in law, we deal with a lot of different languages, thousands and thousands and thousands of different journals. So what would happen is that you read something written by A refers to B and quotes a portion of it. So if you are going to write and you're going to be using B's work in your own writing, then you should cite B. You should find B, read B, and cite B, but also acknowledge A. It is not sufficient just to rely on A's version of B, unless you've got some very good reason for that. And then let's say there's a lot of other things which might come up in Q&A, but especially difficult for law as well is the dichotomy of publish versus perish. We're also forced to publish a lot, and there is definitely a feeling among lawyers in general and academics that we are forced to rather do quantity than quality. And then perhaps most important, and the last thing I can say about integrity, and this is something that the legal field as in general should attend to, is that we've got an obligation to test and develop the law as it is written at the moment, so as to correct deficiencies and objectionable aspects, reactive and proactive to the needs of society. So it might come as a shock to some of you, but there is not really something like black letter law. The law is not a fixed thing, it's a living, breathing thing. And if it's wrong, we need to change it. And with that thought, I'll leave you. I see there's one question. What constitutes the best benefit sharing in law research? And I suppose this touches on when you've got co-authors. Oh, sorry, I understand that comes to ethics. Yeah, in terms of ethics, you know, we mostly won't have direct things like you would have with health sciences, where you could say this type of medicine, if we test it on you, it can cure cancer. And therefore, you know, there's a massive benefit to society. Usually we have less tangible things. What we have things is like, okay, we need to do research about the socioeconomic rights that people have regards housing. Does the government provide proper housing, and is the laws that we have enforcing it properly? So the benefit is not necessarily going to directly benefit any of the participants immediately. As you know, it takes years for anything to happen in South Africa. But one day, somewhere along the line, society will benefit. And at the very least, the general participants will not be at risk. The correlate of that is if you interview some government functionary about corruption in a specific department, and that person is critical, and you don't do proper editing and that person's identity leaks out inadvertently, for example, then that is a major risk. That person could be killed. That is a type of risks that we actually do need to take into account. I think my time is up, so I'll cede the floor to the next speaker, and perhaps right at the end there might be some more questions. I note Mariette's question for later. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof. Erlang. So colleagues, we move over to our third presentation titled Integrity in Natural Sciences, and it will be presented by Dr. Perez Osibo, who is an organic chemistry lecturer and researcher in the areas of practical and computational medicinal chemistry at the Northwest University's Department of Chemistry. Dr. Osibo earned his master's degree in pharmaceutical chemistry at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, working on asymmetric catalysis, and a PhD in chemistry from the University of Johannesburg, working on molecular modeling. His research on computer-aided drug design focuses on the development and application of molecular dynamics as complementary matrix of comparison in the practical bench scale studies of the impact of potential drug inhibitors on enzymatic targets associated with Alzheimer's disease, antimicrobial resistance, Parkinson's disease, and HIV, to name a few. Dr. Spelele has published his research in 10 internationally peer-reviewed journals of theoretical as well as practical applications of organic chemical, biochemical, and microbiological techniques to the discovery of new or repurposing treatments. Dr. Osibo, welcome. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molale Tom. Just share my screen. Right, good evening. Once again, I'd like to thank the program director, Dr. Molale Tom. My name is Perez Osibo. I work at the Department of Chemistry, and this afternoon I'll be discussing a topic titled Integrity in the Natural Sciences. I have been fortunate to watch most of the lectures in this webinar series, and today I can just say that I have understood that the definition of terms has been done, but what I'll just do today is that I will just interest you on the importance of integrity in science, particularly. So I have just 7 points to make, and then I'll give thanks. So the first article I looked at to prepare for this talk was the article published by Bruce McFarlane, titled Academic Integrity, a Review of the Literature. And in this article, they trace the word integrity into 3 origins: the French, the Latin in the 14th century, and the 12th century in the Chinese analogues of Confucius, philosopher who lived in the 5th BC. But my submission to you would be integrity is as old as any document, because in its definition, every document is proof of integrity. Another paper I looked at was the paper from the Cape by Professor Kanyile at the School of Nursing, titled Research Integrity and Misconduct, a clarification of the concepts. And I like this paper very much, and I'll just quickly review what Professor Kanyile and others wrote about. So according to their meaning of research, they say research integrity is just justice and honesty in all stages of research, which means everyone should be careful and report their results honestly. But integrity, as the authors quote Swazi, 1993, they say it embraces the aspirational standard of scientific research. And then they quote the writing of Bolton of 2002, and I read the quote. It says, "The process of doing and reporting science in accordance with accepted practices in their field. These include adherence to principles and practices of scientific standards, education and mentoring, unbiased peer and expert review, and communication of results to the scientific community." Quoting Swazi, they say the basic tenets of research are trustworthiness, and so research integrity is something that should be transmitted down the generational tree. And remember, I said integrity is something that can be traced back to every document, because every document from any culture is actually just proof of integrity. And finally, they say it should be validated through a continuous dialogue with everyone that is involved, because the aim of research ethics, which is a different term from research integrity, it is to protect everyone that is involved in the research. So finally, what I liked about Dr. Kanyile, Professor Kanyile's direction is when they say, we argue and propose that research integrity be viewed positively from an educational or developmental perspective rather than from a regulatory perspective, because we believe it is only compassion that will assist researchers in their endeavors to maintain research integrity at all times. So again, like I said, I have watched the series of the webinars, and I have looked at the different speakers speak on the principles of integrity. And just for the definition of terms, I won't be going through this, but when I was preparing, I looked at these were the proceeding from the Royal Irish Academy of Sciences held in Dublin, 24 September 2009, writing by Peter Drent at Vrije University in Amsterdam, titled Research Integrity, Protecting Science, Society, and Individuals. What we can see here, Peter, these are verbatim bullets from the point. So I've seen in the previous talks that these have been covered in detail. But really, what I just want to talk about is this last point: responsibility for future science generation, which I'll read shortly to say, the education of young scientists and scholars requires binding standards for mentorship and supervision, which this talks to scientists as people who are teachers of the next generation of scientists. So again, while we were still there, I just wanted to know, why is science important? Why does everyone talk about science and scientists? And then I looked at this paper, the EMBO report by Valenti Ral, titled The Most Important Application of Science. And according to the author, he says, well, science is valued by society because of its applications and the results of applications, which satisfy many human needs that improve living standards. It could be finding new cures, clean energy, clean water. So science is synonymously driving economic growth. And so it is viewed as a return on investment for the prolongation of life, which is what we call sustainability. So it is these arguments, the authors say, that scientists use to get funds from the government or to gain social standing. So of course, because we know the history points out that most of the tools and technologies and medicine we use today are products of science, whether directly or indirectly, whether we're talking a pen or a rocket science, aspirin or organ transplant, it all comes from science. So the author then quotes in a call to action to say, it is time to seriously consider how science and research can contribute to education at all levels of society. So of course, if we say science is a driver of economic growth and is a return on investment for public funding, of course, then it is a foundation in society. Just quickly, I wanted to draw your attention to the South African government investment on higher education in general, not particularly science. And you can see on the 2017-2018 fiscal year, the government spending at least a fifth of government funds went into higher education, and at least a quarter of that fifth went into tertiary education. And these are the specific units you can see in the year 2018, how much money came from government grants and from the non-grant funding to the government. And this was just published by Statistics SA, which actually tells us directly how much money, blue is money that each institution gets from government, orange is the tuition fees, while gray is the other. We can see Northwest University that in the 2019 fiscal year got 42% of its 5.3 billion budget from the government. And of course, from the National Treasury, this booklet explains exactly how much those monies are spent in science and technology. And for the 2019 fiscal year, all the audited reports from all the funds of the university can be found in the Northwest University Integrated Report. So why is it important that we have integrity in science? Well, I looked at this article because African scientists contribute immensely in the world. So I looked at this Journal of Scientometrics in 2015, where the authors claimed that the number of scientific papers published by researchers in Africa that year had been rising faster than the total world scientific output in the years before. This is Journal in Mathematics, where they designed a model to actually calculate the amount of papers that Africans contribute in the global world. You can see here that the comparison is China, India, Brazil, and Russia. What you can see from this model is that Africa is divided into 4 sections. It's Africa, it's Northern Africa, it's Southern Africa, it's Central Africa. Just a take-home message, of course, I invite you to look at this journal, is that you can see that Africa is contributing immensely in the World Science Foundation. And of course, our contribution must have integrity. Just, I wanted to talk about the recent SA Science highlights, which still talking about integrity. We are in the middle of a national pandemic, global pandemic, and we know that the science fraternity or the sciences in South Africa particularly were commended greatly by the way they responded to COVID-19. And scientists are supposed to be equipped so that they are able to respond in all national disasters. So South Africa was commended by the WHO, by the UN. And back at home at Northwest University, I think it was on level 4. We already, as well in the department, by the support of the Executive Dean, Professor Modise, and the Director of Research and Innovation, Professor Nene Sikhabi, the Director of the school, Professor Kata Taseru, and the HOD, Dr. Zembeli Mkize, we visited the schools in the surrounding of Northwest. I think it was on level 4. In our lab, we synthesized or mixed sanitizers and antiseptic products, and we delivered them. And we were joined by high university offices as well on the ground. As you can see, the leadership of the school with the leadership of the Office of the Assigned Function, particularly the Dean, Professor Medupe, and the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Sitlalendwa. To talk about responsible conduct of research, and I've seen, as I've said, I've seen in the series of webinars that this has been covered in great detail. But when we talk about responsible conduct of research, it's informed research. And we learn that research wasn't really regulated until the 1940s, after the so-called Doctors' Trial of 1946. And so the Nuremberg Code of 1946 was enacted, followed by the Declaration of Helsinki in 1964, which was followed by the Belmont Report of 1979. All of these 3 reports are not documents that you really, as scientists, we read. We just understand them to be documents that inform us to do a thorough research prior to our project. So we do a literature review, thorough literature review. Particularly for South Africa, then in 1996, we had our own constitution. All practicals and experiments that are taking place in our laboratories at Northwest University have to abide by the constitution. And we've seen in the lectures before that the constitution protects people and cultures and all those who are involved in research. And of course, we know that there are other organs of state like the Department of Health and the South African Medical Research Council that actually produce documents that are specific guidelines for research that actually maybe involved human and animal participants. So, but the most popular document when you talk about responsible conduct of research, which is mostly cited, is the 2010 Singapore Statement on integrity, because even in the 2016 European Code of Conduct for research, it's just putting the principles that are enshrined in the Singapore Statement into practice. At the university, we have policies that actually guide us into research to ensure that the research that takes place into the university is of high standard. And so we have the higher degrees policy and the research ethics policy and the research innovation policy. All of these 3 policies boil down to what we call the research application process, which is a 3-tier program involving scientific community, research ethics, and the research data gatekeeper. Of course, I'm not going to go through this. I saw in the lecture last week by my colleague, Mr. Machine, that he did cover this in great detail. In conclusion, I would like to quote the Honorable Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Dr. Ubaba Blade Nzimande, and I will quote from the Department of Science and Innovation Strategic Plan. And I quote, it is important to understand that solutions resulting from research and development take time. Many of the successes of the department and its entities have been long in the making. For an example, the Hydrogen South Africa program, now entering the 3rd phase of its implementation, was approved in 2009. And South Africa's role in the iconic Square Kilometre Array radio telescope program began many years before we were selected to co-host the Global Mega Science Project in 2012. This time, I would like to sincerely give gratitude to my land manager, Dr. Zimbili Mkize, and the director of the school, Professor Katata Seru, without whom this presentation wouldn't be a success. And through the Office of the Director, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to the Office of Research and Innovation, particularly the Director of Research and Innovation, Professor Nene Sihabi, and the Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation, Professor Vanders. And lastly, I would like to thank you, ladies and thank you, Raleboha. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Osibo, for that presentation. I see all the questions in the Q&A platform have already been answered, and there isn't any incoming question thus far. So colleagues, that brings us to the end of our program. And I would like to call upon the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, Professor Abi Kotze, to come and give closing remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Lesego, and colleagues, for the invitation to do a couple of closing remarks at this fourth session of a Northwest University Research Integrity webinar series, and this one which specifically focuses on scientific integrity in research. Just to recap, the first session focused on plagiarism, followed by integrity and quality in research in the second session, and the first session focused on research integrity and ethics. Today we hear how various disciplines apply scientific integrity in their fields, namely engineering, law, and natural sciences, and I must admit I've learned a lot. It was very interesting listening to our speakers. And I do not all intend to repeat what they have said, but I think we can all agree that it was very learning and meaningful what we hear from them. I would like to conclude the session today by emphasizing a set of principles and best practices developed by Kretzner et al. In 2019, and that was provided to me by Prof. Minnery Greef, that we can use across scientific disciplines as a mechanism for consensus on scientific integrity standards. The two principles highlighted are: in the first place, to foster a culture of integrity in the scientific process, and in the second place, evidence-based policy interest must not adhere with scientific integrity. So that's the two principles. And that is followed by 9 best practices, which is given as follows. One of them, universal training in robust and up-to-date scientific methods, ensuring responsible research practices. Strengthen scientific integrity, oversight and processes by focusing on ethics and conduct. It's the second one. Another one, encourage reproducibility of research through transparency. Another one, strive to establish open science, and that's a topic of discussion which is also very popular nowadays. Another one, develop and implement educational tools to teach communication skills that uphold scientific integrity. Strive to further strengthen the peer review process. Scientific journals should publish unanticipated findings that meet standards of quality and scientific integrity. Seek harmonization and implementation among journals for transparent processes for correction and or retraction of published papers, and ninth one, design rigorous and comprehensive evaluation criteria that reward highest standards of research integrity. Finally, and I think our last speaker has mentioned the Singapore Statement of 2012. I want to quote from that, and it said, "The value and benefits of research are vitally dependent on the integrity of a research." And while I was listening to the speakers, I was thinking, who and what you are and what we are, in other words, our status, is determined by our knowledge and our practice of research integrity. And if we believe in our hearts that we will still remain focused and relevant for many years to come. Chairperson, thank you very much. And with this, I thank also everyone for sitting through this short time and listening to our speakers. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Prof. Avi. And colleagues, that brings us at the end of our webinar series. I would also like to pass my heartfelt gratitude to all the organizers of this webinar series, the presenters, the technical team, as well as all participants. Thank you very much, colleagues. Hopefully from now on, we will strive for a higher level of scientific integrity. May you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.